Well, guys, it looks like whether we like it or not, we are now in an era, not just in crypto, but specifically in Cardano as well. We are in an era of having to cut some deals. If at this point you would pretty much cut any deal, if it would just help the price go up, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right. Thank you for joining, guys. Thank you for joining. All right. Let's see who's here. Sorry. Today was a little bit more hustling than normal. Actually, tremendously more hustling to make this happen than normal today. But we made it. We're here. And I appreciate you guys being here. Pucky Hawk says, "Woot, we need to cut a lot of deals and get some Cardano dancers and maybe a bikini team and a brand of beer." That all sounds so good. Unfortunately, those are bull market things, and we are in something else right now. Troll Toll says, hello. Otis Fricho, let's go. Thank you for joining. Kwong, he is here. I'm gonna start telling people I'm a he. I like that, Kwong. That's pretty good. Omar Wright is here. Good evening. Pucky Hawk says, "Whoa, Michael Jackson flashback. Is that the? Oh, that's the he. The he is a Michael Jackson flashback, right?" 2110. Hi, thanks for joining. Thank you for being here. Rulo, hola. Thank you for joining. 2110 says, "Any update on Bitcoin DeFi on Cardano?" We're going to talk about a video where Charles mentions Bitcoin DeFi, but I'm afraid we don't have much. We don't have much in the direction of substantive things to say about it at this point. And when I say us, I mean, basically like public knowledge. I don't think anything's been added to sort of the public corpus of knowledge on what's going on there. Bramberto says, "Yes, let's will and deal. No more free money and make everyone pay back the treasury as revenue improves through investment." That is exactly half of what we're going to talk about for sure. That's the sort of micro side of what we're going to talk about that applies to our ecosystem. And the macro side is something else. Good evening, Mark Going. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for being here live. I appreciate it. So let's talk about what we're talking about. So like I said, half of this sort of applies on the micro level to our little Cardano corner of the crypto ecosystem. The other half is what you see in this thumbnail, and it's kind of what we hope is not going on. What we hope is not going on, but the realist in me believes it definitely is what's going on. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Fly Over Me. You made it. Thank you for making it. Daddy Joe says, "Good evening, AOS. Thanks for continuing to put out great content." My pleasure. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining, Daddy Joe. Fun Club MDN. Hello. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you guys being here. So obviously what we have here is a crypto bro in his hoodie shaking hands with what can only be described as a banker of some sort. And I think we all know there's some of this going on right now, right? It might not be enthusiastic on both sides. It might not even be a compromise either side wants, but something like this is going on in DC right now. At least this is what the policymakers in DC want to be happening. The question we don't know the answer to is how much this is really going on and which direction, who's getting pulled in which direction. Is the crypto guy getting pulled in by the banker? Is the banker getting pulled in by the crypto guy? The realist in me, like I said, does not believe this is going to be split down the middle, right? One way or the other. This has always been a zero-sum negotiation. Somebody's going to come out of this losing something. So we'll see how this goes. Government doesn't work without this image. True. Sadly true. Shady back alley deals. I'm not even calling them backroom deals. I'm calling them back alley deals. Fun Club MDN says, "How are you?" That's to me, doing pretty good. Hustling, vibe coding so much this week. So much vibe coding going on, especially today. The last couple of days, just like ridiculous amount. But pretty big breakthrough today. So that was great. Jay Coco says, let's fucking go. Click the like, making the deals. Yeah. So let's talk about these deals. Let's talk about these deals a little bit. What is going on here? So first of all, what's going on in the wider world? This was going on in the wider world today. So finally, the equities markets are feeling a little bit of what we've been feeling for a long time now. I think this is yeah, like this picture right here. This is how crypto has felt for a long time. Like the last year, crypto has pretty much felt this way. I know some of this is like kind of politically slanted, and that's not why I'm showing it, but it's more just, you know, this is what we've been getting lately. A whole lot of red in crypto, and finally, at least for one day, the equities markets are kind of feeling our pain. Yeah, extreme fear. We've been in that for the last year. Crypto has been, at the bottom of all of the metrics, all of the ways you could possibly measure how things are going in crypto. We've been at the bottom, definitely in the extreme fear part of the scale for a long time now. I'm sure, if you're watching it closely, we're like dipping in and out of extreme fear to something else, but definitely been in a bad way. So it's interesting to see the stock market seeing some of the same things we've been seeing. So let's talk about the positive part first. Let's talk about the kinds of deals that Cardano needs to be making right now. So let's go back a bit. So we're not going to go through Charles's whole video. This is an hour and 8-minute long video. This is his video from 2 days ago. He goes through a lot of things here, but we're just going to talk sort of at a high level. And he really zoomed in on his whiteboard, really zoomed in on the whiteboard here. But we're going to talk at a high level about some of the deals that I think he's right. Charles is right in a lot of ways about a lot of things in this video. This is kind of one of these videos where you could tell he went away and really thought hard about what he thinks needs to happen in the ecosystem. And I actually really appreciate that Charles, when things are bad, he doesn't just sort of throw his hands up and say, yo guys, good luck. I'm doing glow in the dark plants right now. You guys sort this out in the next couple of years. I'll see you when prices are good again. Because as a guy, with the resources he has, that'd be pretty easy to do and pretty tempting, especially for him, where he's gotten so much static from so many people over the years on Cardano. So I really appreciate that Charles does not do that. He doesn't just like throw his hands up and walk away for a couple of years. A lot of founders kind of do that in crypto. A, they just walk away and never come back. Or B, when things are bad, you just don't hear from them. They're just like chilling, theoretically working every day, but kind of just chilling until things are good again. And then when sentiment is good, they pop back up and it's like, hey, party time, I'm back. And then they're nowhere to be seen during the bad times. Charles is kind of the opposite of that. Charles, we sort of see him during the good times, the bad times. And when it's bad times, you can tell he puts a lot of mental energy into trying to come up with any kind of a framework to approach how to make things better. I appreciate that. You can agree or disagree with his conclusions, but it's hard to say that anybody in crypto puts more mental energy into trying to improve things for their ecosystem when the chips are down, when things are bad. Every single time things have been like this, Charles is putting out these videos and he comes up with these brand new frameworks, like a brand new way to approach this. He's like, hey guys, let me throw some ideas at you. I've got a bunch of ideas. And in this video, like a lot of his videos, he sort of goes through peaks and valleys where he's like very, Charles, hard on his sleeve guy, upset about the way things have gone in the past, and other times very ecstatic. But the beautiful thing is he's presenting a framework here. He's like, hey guys, here's my thinking on how we win, right? Which is pretty much the only thing that matters at times like this. When times are bad, what you really want to know, you don't need anybody to lament the hard times with you. We all already know we're in a hard time right now. But what you need is somebody to give you a plan to win. And, like I said, you can agree or disagree with his plan, but at least he's thinking hard about it. I think that's kind of what you need from the leader of an ecosystem at a time like this. I know he would probably not put that label on himself as such, but it was encouraging. It was very encouraging to see this video. So Brown Beardo says, this was one of my favorites from the big man in a while. I tracked with all of it. I just don't know who's going to step up and make it happen. He's right that he cannot save us from ourselves now. True. Unfortunately true. Yeah, I saw that post. Thank you for tagging me in that post. We probably won't cover that tonight because it's a little bit complicated to explain exactly what's going on. But thank you for tagging me in that, and I hope we can talk about that in the future. But yeah, thanks for tagging me in that post. Maybe we'll have time to get to it tonight, but I don't think so. So first of all, I think here's maybe the most important thing. If you only took one thing away from this over 1 hour video, here's the most important thing. Charles identifies 3 different silos of things we basically need to tackle in the ecosystem. You've got infrastructure, utility, and experiences, right? And this seems kind of common sense, right? I mean, this seems kind of simplistic, but we don't normally talk about it this way, right? We sort of talk, at least lately, we end up talking about, people wanting money and whether or not we think they should get that money. That's about all we talk about, especially that's all Cardano governance is these days. We don't really say to ourselves like, hey, what's in the infrastructure bucket? What's in the utility bucket? What's in the experiences bucket? We just say, this guy wants money. Do we like him or hate him? And it's like 50% of the people are like, totally hate him. And 50% of the people are like, love him. And then it's like, who votes more? Who can mobilize the vote more? That determines whether that person gets the money. But that's not really the right way to go about it, right? And Charles, to his credit, he points out something really important here. He kind of admits that a fault of our ecosystem has been that we've focused too much on infrastructure, this bottom silo. He identifies the people sort of involved in this as the I people. And he points out we have great I people in the ecosystem, right? And they built some really cool things. I think we can all agree the big selling point for Cardano, we've talked about it in the last few days, even for AI, the giant selling point has been the meticulous way in which our infrastructure has been architected, right? We've got this unbelievable infrastructure as if a bunch of scientists got together and planned this shit out, because that's basically what happened, right? Instead of it being the weird autistic kid in his parents' basement, which is the way some very large blockchains also started. Instead of that, we had a bunch of scientists who got together and created, what they thought of as the perfect plan for, the architecture of a blockchain like this. So we're a very different kind of blockchain, and we put a lot of time and money into infrastructure, and most of it wasn't even us, right? It wasn't even the community. It was really IOG. IOG got an amount of ADA um, in the their founder allocation at the launch of the ecosystem that ended up being worth a lot of money when the price of ADA was high. And they kind of used that benefit to do all this stuff for us, create all this infrastructure. What they're good at is that creating infrastructure. What they haven't done, and what sort of an R&D and engineering company is maybe not as good at, are the other 2 categories. So you got to have some engineering and some R&D and stuff in the utility bucket. The experience bucket, very different. So let's talk about what we're talking about here. So under infrastructure, you've got all of the things that make the blockchain go, right? You've got all of the things that IOG has done for us over the years, other engineering houses are doing for us now, all of the stuff that makes up the roads across the land of Cardano. This is all the infrastructure. But people will only drive on those roads if there's something in the land of Cardano they want to see, right? So there's got to be some utility. So under infrastructure, we've got all of the fundamentals of our blockchain. Under utility, we've actually got to have some things like dApps that they want to come use. We could have the best infrastructure in the world. If we don't have dApps that people actually want to come use, they're never going to come and use our infrastructure. They're never going to drive into the land of Cardano and experience how wonderful our roads are. Instead, they're just not going to come here. And that's largely where we've been throughout the existence of Cardano. We've got a bunch of very enthusiastic insiders like all of us, everybody listening to these videos, everybody in the army of spies. We're all very enthusiastic insiders who love the infrastructure here, all the benefits of the infrastructure, and we know how smooth these roads are. However, this whole time we've sort of been waiting for the utility. And what Charles is telling us in this video is no one is coming to save us. No one's coming to build out that utility. We've got to cut some deals to make that part happen. We've kind of already cut the deals to make the infrastructure thing happen, right? For the most part. And we didn't really even have to cut that deal. IOG just sort of did it for us. There's still infrastructure building going on, and there will still need to be additional things, and we're still funding things right now. That's going to go on. But most of the infrastructure was built out. It was just a deal that was sort of served up to us on a silver platter. IOG was like, hey, we're going to build out a bunch of shit. And if you guys like that, then join the ecosystem. And we all joined. But now it's time for us to cut some deals and do the utility thing, right? So here's where we've got to be kind of skillful. Here's where it's capitalism, right? It's not just follow the people in charge. This is where we actually have to be skillful, make some good decisions, exercise good decision making. And if we fuck it up, we'll probably fuck ourselves up, right? Nobody's going to make these decisions for us because we have self-governance now. So we have to vote in favor of the right kinds of utility. And it's kind of a weird time right now because what represents the highest utility in crypto might be changing right now. A big theme of this channel has been talking about the different eras in crypto, how we had sort of a Bitcoin only era, and then Ethereum came along and we had smart contracts, which allowed for this ICO era, and then allowed for sort of a DeFi summer era. And then we had an NFT era, and then a meme coin era. Currently, we're just in this era that sucks, except for prediction markets are doing well. So, it might be changing. Like what represents the highest level of utility in crypto might be something very different, in, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now than it has been in the past. So we're gonna have to make some decisions and cut some deals. And what Charles is, we'll probably talk about this in more detail in the future. It's a lot to cover. This is a very dense video. Charles presents a lot of different ideas, and this is kind of a nuanced framework he's promoting here, a nuanced framework for growing the ecosystem. Charles, no one has ever accused him of his ideas being simple, right? Nobody's been like, your ideas are too simple. That's not an accusation thrown at him too often. So like always, there's some nuance to this plan, right? It's not overly simple. But and we can get into that in the future. Obviously, if you've watched the video, he talks about creating sort of an index of all the utilitous, apps and dApps and other things on the blockchain, and the treasury owning that index asset. We don't need to talk about that tonight, but he does make a good point that we need to stop giving people free shit. Like we need to stop just giving random people free ADA on the hopes that they build something cool. Charles makes a point. It's got to be a win-win situation between the community and the projects we fund. We shouldn't just make it free and sort of like cross our fingers, and let it rip. We've got to kind of invest. We've got to make smart choices and invest and say, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money, and in exchange, for this money, you're not just going to walk off and we hope you build something cool that adds value and pumps our bags. We're going to actually have an interest in your entity. And Charles has some unique ideas. he gives an example of, maybe we give somebody some money, and in exchange for that, they have to take 10% of, their cash flow if they're successful, 10% of the revenue, and buy ADA with it and donate that ADA back to the treasury, things like that. Something that looks a lot like a normal investment. A normal investment where every year the company is like, hey, we turned a profit. Here's a piece of the profit. I think Charles is right. We need to sort of quit just like giving people money, just like YOLOing into these projects and being like, take our money and make the ecosystem more valuable. We hope you build something awesome and make the ecosystem more valuable, because we've seen that fail. We've seen that fail a lot, right? I won't dive into the many criticisms of the sort of funding, the history of funding in Cardano. That's something that people talk about ad nauseum on X all day, in Cardano X. So you guys have all been exposed to those discussions before. We don't need to cover them now, but it definitely leaves something to be desired. We haven't built a bunch of killer dApps. Let me put it that way. The most trite way I could possibly say it, right? We have not built like a dozen killer dApps with all of our catalyst funding, right? We haven't, droves of people haven't, adopted Cardano because we built such cool dApps that they couldn't stay away. That hasn't been the case. So Charles is proposing here that we stop doing this. Here's some free money, YOLO, right? He's proposing we make investments in these companies, and it's no longer this free money situation. I think he's probably right, because the free money thing just hasn't worked, right? What we've seen a lot of like people just sort of paying themselves, like regular dev salaries, off, kind of like the 225K a year dev salary to work, and then they work enough to not get in trouble in many cases. And we have a very wide spectrum of people. We have very good developers in this ecosystem, and every other type of developer too. But what's happened in a lot of cases, we've given people money and they've done some work, and we did not end up with a dozen killer dApps out of it. Let me just put it that way, right? So people have created some killer infrastructure. I think we can argue there's some killer infrastructure in Cardano. Has that attracted killer dApps? No, it has not. We do not have a dozen killer dApps. We need to make some investments in, some utility, some projects that represent utility that will draw people to our killer infrastructure. We need the killer dApps. We have killer infrastructure, arguably. Most people don't understand it. They can't understand technically why our infrastructure is so killer, but people do sort of, if you look closely and you understand what's going on technically, you can make an argument that we do have killer infrastructure. We just need to get the killer dApps. And this isn't a problem that's just relegated to Cardano. You could argue that crypto doesn't really have too many killer dApps. We have DeFi, but I don't like walk past some grandmas in the park and they're like, oh shit, I can't wait to get home so I can do some DeFi, right? we don't, that's not what's going on, maybe it was like that during DeFi summer. Maybe NFTs were like that for a second during the NFT era. Maybe even meme coins, you had some young crypto bros who were super into meme coins, but we haven't had that in crypto. We've had these like flash in the pan manias, these fads, but we haven't had that killer dApp moment where I'm in the post office and I hear some grandmas saying, I don't know how crypto works, but I know I want to use that killer dApp, right? That we haven't had that moment yet in crypto. We need to have that moment. And especially in Cardano, we need to have some projects that represent utility that actually draws people to our ecosystem. Maybe Midnight turns out to be that thing, right? But Midnight was another thing that was just kind of served up to us on a silver platter. IOG just built it. We didn't do that. We didn't invest in a project and have them, have this win-win scenario where if they're successful, we're successful, and the money comes back to our treasury. We didn't have that. We've only had these things where we give people free money. We just kind of YOLO'd a bunch of ADA over to somebody and crossed our fingers. But that hasn't worked in the past. And it's, there's no reason to expect it's going to work differently in the future. So I think Charles makes a very good argument there. On the experience front, right? He puts a lot of different things in the experience category. Here you can see he's talking about wallets. He's also talking about content creators. On the wallet front, I think we actually do have some pretty good wallets, right? I've never, I haven't like over the last couple of years at least, I haven't like thought about Cardano and thought to myself, damn, if only we had better wallets. Like that's not the main problem in Cardano. And I don't think that's what Charles is implying here. He does point out, I thought it was hilarious. I actually laughed out loud as I was listening to it today. He points out that he thinks there are only 6 people in Cardano consistently making content about Cardano. And at first I laughed, and then I got thinking to myself, and I was like, damn, I don't even know if I can name 6 people in Cardano who are consistently making content, because people are sort of, retiring left and right from making Cardano content. And Charles points out you can't really blame them. Obviously I am one of these people who makes content about Cardano. So my insights on this are going to be extremely biased, no matter how much I try to insulate my views from that bias, they're going to be super biased. But Charles, the way he puts it, he points out, none of those 6 people are really making any money on the content creation. And then when they do try to figure out a way to make money, the way Charles puts it, it's like they go to the community, and the community's like, go fuck yourself, which is, I haven't seen as much of that lately, but I will admit, like maybe the first content creator, one of the first big content creators in Cardano was the guy along with Rick who did the Cardano Effect podcast. And one of the really early sort of catalyst proposals that caused some drama, one of the earliest ones I can think of that caused a lot of drama was the Cardano Effect guy. I can't believe Philippe. Thank you. S. Walker. Thank you. God, thank you. I really appreciate Philippe. So I feel terrible. It's just been so long. But yeah, Philippe. So Philippe put out, he threw a proposal into Catalyst, right? And I can't even remember how much he wanted. He was going to continue making podcasts about Cardano. This is really early on. He was going to continue making podcasts about Cardano, and he wanted like 80K or something like that. Or, I'm going to mess up the number, but it wasn't ridiculous, right? He wasn't asking for $1 million to make, a podcast about Cardano. And there were like 2 people. It was like him and Rick. It was like 2 people. So it wasn't even like a living. It was just like kind of enough, and like Charles points out, he's like the people making content about Cardano, like it actually costs money and nobody's actually making money. It's just sort of a bunch of people doing it for the love of the game, and that's definitely what Philippe was doing. He was putting out a really good product, right? Philippe was a very good podcast host, putting out a really good product, and fucking couldn't get any money out of Catalyst. Okay, Fly Over Me remembers 75K. That sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah, he couldn't. He put the Catalyst proposal in there, and he had done a ton of shows. Philippe had done a ton of shows, and they weren't, it wasn't a show where he just sat down and did a video. He like had guests on. They're delving into very technical topics with technical people. He's explaining all the shit, just going through everything in Cardano, like everything you would want a Cardano podcast to be. He let the community name it, and he the Catalyst, he couldn't get the money out of Catalyst, right? Could not get the money out of Catalyst. And as I recall, Philippe had a business. He was like a federal contractor. He had a business, obviously that needed to be taken care of. Yeah, I think Fly Over Me is pointing that out here. As Walker says, he basically after that said F you to Cardano. Fly Over Me says no, he had to feed his children. Yeah, yeah, if I remember correctly, he was like a federal contractor. He had some contracts with some federal agencies to do some things. And he wisely had to focus on his business, I'm sure. As Fly, I have no idea about Philippe's family or anything like that, but I'm sure he had bills to pay like we all do. So, he was just like, okay, man, I gave you guys, like, I can't remember if he was doing those podcasts for a couple of years, maybe. He's like, I gave you guys, a ton of podcasts to pump the ecosystem. You guys basically told me it was worth nothing. You would give me nothing. To be fair, it was a proposal. So it was like just yes or no on the 75. It wasn't, does Philippe deserve anything? But community voted no. So he was like, fair enough, I'm out. He did like one additional video after that I remember. Didn't even monetize the video. He just kind of jumped on and did an AMA where he answered people's questions. But he did not seem happy during that AMA. Obviously, because he put so much work into it, and the community wouldn't even give him the money, for two people. So Charles doesn't mention Philippe in this video that I remember, but he does say like, hey guys, this is fucked up. We've only got 6 people making content about Cardano. You probably have to do something for them. You probably need way more than 6 people, and you probably need to do something to get people to make good content about Cardano. Because if people aren't talking about Cardano, if you don't have the people out there making videos and hyping up Cardano and talking about how wonderful it is, you're not going to bring new people in. Let's face it. A big part of people coming into crypto ecosystems is people hearing about different crypto ecosystems on social media. Social media is the way things work these days. So if we don't have content creators who are excited about Cardano, we're gonna have a really hard time bringing people in. I think he's right about that. I've always said that the perfect situation, the optimal situation for me would be if I'm the smallest content creator in all of Cardano. Like, I would love it if my content was both the worst content and I was the smallest in all of Cardano. That would mean I'm in the right ecosystem, right? And part of this is not anything to do with Cardano. I'm not. I don't think Charles was, and I'm definitely not faulting the Cardano community for like lack of support of content creators. It's just that crypto's not good right now. Crypto's not a place where you can really make money right now. So a lot of content creators are just stopping to make content. You know what I mean? Because there's no way to make money and there's no money in it. He does point out that in some other ecosystems, like he cites both Solana and Ethereum. He's like, in both those ecosystems, there's some kind of an entity or something that'll pay the content creators. So you're going to have way more content about Solana and Ethereum because the content creators get paid. And in Cardano, you got like 6. There's like 6 people, according to Charles, and who are like actively making content. I'd have to go through and count. I guess I don't pay attention to who's making videos like once every 2 months versus these days, versus who's making content on a more regular basis. But I mean, I could definitely think of more than 6 content creators who I really like in the ecosystem, but I haven't checked lately to see when's the last time they made a video. So maybe a lot of them just aren't making videos right now. But definitely I can say social media is one of the big modes of advertising for ecosystems now. In the past we've had IOG. Like, IOG obviously has like a marketing department, and they are, I think Tim Harrison and those guys have done like a great job, marketing some super technical shit to a bunch of, people who are both technical and non-technical. So I think they've done a great job, but it can't be IOG's role anymore. They can't be the main advertising. They can't be the main party we look to anymore for advertising. We've got to do it as a community. So, Charles points out, like, for Midnight, he's got this whole core of people who he's trying to turn into the Midnight ambassadors. And I guess he's doing a thing every single Friday night for them to kind of, show them how to get the the message about Midnight out there, which is great. But Charles has kind of got to focus on Midnight in that respect. He obviously can't be doing that for Midnight and Cardano simultaneously. And the whole point of Cardano having its own governance is we've got to figure this shit out on ourselves because, like I said, no one's coming to save us. We have to self-rescue here. And I don't want to make it sound too dire either because everything in crypto sucks right now. Everything in crypto sucks right now. Cardano has kind of gotten along on sort of a wing and a prayer all this time. You know, it's like we have this amazingly we have this amazing potential because the infrastructure is so good and the community is so strong. But you know, right now we're kind of at the bottom of the sentiment curve, and now's the right time to kind of start building back up for next time. So we've got to figure all three of these silos out: the experience thing, you know, which has to do with like actual user experience inside things like wallets, which I think is actually okay. And we've also got to figure out the content creator thing. So, you know, while in the past, I think I've actually even voted no on on things in the past that had to do with funding creators. But, you know, Charles is probably right. Um, if Solana and Ethereum are funding content creators, they're just going to have a hell of a lot more content than an ecosystem like Cardano, where nobody can make money creating content about the community. So I think that's, you know, less important than the utility thing. I think if you have really good dApps, killer dApps that are exciting, people are going to make content about it anyways. So I think that's actually the more important part. But I have to admit, even though I would be the first one to vote no against paying content creators, Charles has a good point here. If you have an entity in the EVM world, in the SVM world that's paying the content creators and you don't in Cardano, you're just going to have a hell of a lot more content over on that side of the world than you are ours. And we're going to suffer for it. So, okay. God, I remember Wallace Inc. I remember that name. But I can't remember the details. And I can almost picture the dude, I think, but I can't remember the details. That's such esoteric Cardano lore, if I'm remembering right. S. Walker says, trust me, I get it. I have 8 bitches to pay for. Yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem. Maybe we were too focused on getting the value back from content creation, but I still don't think we've come to a decision on what measurable KPIs are important for this case. Yeah, I mean, that's always been my main problem with the content creation is it's really easy to give money to content creators, but you kind of get like the most kind of vacuous, like you get like such terrible, cringy content. Like, I mean, if you put out, if the money is there, you'll get all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork to make content. And, you know, maybe it's because of the kind of content I make. God, some of the content you get is just like so terrible. Like you can get like the good, like, you know, Cardano 101 tutorials. We have people in the community, not me, but other people in the community who are good at making that kind of material. I could name a bunch of people right now, and any of you could too, who are really good at doing those tutorials. And they should probably get money for that kind of stuff. But you also just get like the cringiest, worst content. Like I said, I think the tutorial stuff is great, but you can also get like the worst, cringiest content. You know, it's like there's just a million, you know, like generic crypto influencers who wouldn't really give a damn about what the Cardano ecosystem is about. And, you know, somehow they're the ones who always end up getting a lot of that money, and they just do the worst. They do the worst, cringiest content that like probably doesn't represent like what I think about the Cardano space, but who knows? Maybe that's the stuff that brings in the mainstream. So maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to do that cringy, you know, sort of like vapid stuff. Maybe that's the stuff we need to fund to bring in the mainstream. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to swallow the kind of stuff that comes out of that, but we probably need to do it anyways. I mean, if that's what's working for the Ethereums and the Solanas of the world, maybe that's what we need to do. I wish we knew exactly what kind of compensation their ecosystem are giving. Nobody ever discloses it. That part is shady, in my opinion, but we've got to shift gears and try new things. Yeah, this is a really funny thing. So I think I think I can talk about this. I won't say who it was, but a very reputable organization, extremely reputable, nothing shady about them all at all. Uh like hit me up recently a couple different times, right? And wanted to do things on the channel. And like you guys probably know, every bit of advertising that's ever happened on this channel, which is only like 3 parties, in the last cycle. I don't know when the last time was, probably like, I don't know if it was like 2022 or something, or 2021. But anyways, no, it would have been after that. Would have been after that, but not much after that. But it's been a long time since I've had any kind of sponsors on this channel whatsoever. I think I've only had 3 total, and 2 of them were just like listeners of the channel who had some kind of project going on, and they were like, "Hey, I'll sponsor an episode," or whatever. So those were 2 of the 3. So, but anyways, a very reputable organization hit me up a couple times over the last couple months, including last week, and they were like, "Hey, we wanted to inquire about you talking about this product or something like that." And they were like, "Could you please send us your rate cards?" And I was like, it was so funny because I was like, "You guys think I have a rate card? Like, you guys think I like have prices for things that I send out? Like, I haven't heard anybody even ask to do any kind of sponsorship stuff in years. Like, not only do I not have a rate card, I have no idea what would even be reasonable. That's how little advertising money there is in crypto generally, right? I mean, obviously we all know there are sponsors for the really big crypto podcasts and those kind of things. But actually, if you ask pretty much anybody making content in the Cardano ecosystem, if you ask them like, "Hey, how much to do this?" It's like there's so little advertising going on, they probably wouldn't even know what the right amount was. And in the case, just to clear up, just to conclude the story, in the case of this very reputable organization that hit me up last week, I basically figured out like there was no way to even do it without doxing myself, because they're a reputable organization and they need to, they have financials and they have to talk about who they're giving money to. So obviously I'm not trying to dox myself. So I just told them I probably wasn't the right guy for anything like that. But I thought it was hilarious. They were asking for rate cards, and I was like, and they have, like legit, marketing professionals doing this. And I'm like, man, I don't know how many Cardano influencers actually have rate cards, because there's not really anyone for us to even give those cards to. So that's kind of the state of the content creation, advertising, marketing Cardano. And I think that's like actually outside of, like I said, outside of the big podcasts that are actually making money in crypto, in this kind of bear market, that's most of crypto, right? You've got the giant podcasts and they've got all kinds of sponsors, but most of the content in crypto in a bear market like this, it's not income producing. It's just kind of, it's running on pure enthusiasm. Maybe that's the best way to put it. What kind of deals do I have to make to get out of these mines? God, that's the aspiration of everybody making content in crypto, I think. What do I have to do to get out of these damn mines? Certainly I've tried time and time again, and I always find myself picking up the shovel, picking up the pickaxe, and heading back down into the mines. So I don't think any of us know the answer to that question. I think we're all going to be very surprised with the success of Cardano. Maybe surprised is the word, maybe pleased. This is what keeps me. This is why I've never lost interest, and why I'm always making content about Cardano. So deep down, I'm very, very optimistic about crypto in general, and I'm very optimistic about Cardano. And I think that's why, honestly, that's why everybody who's making content in Cardano, hell, everybody who's making dApps, everybody who's creating dApps in Cardano, everybody's building in Cardano, everybody who's building infrastructure. Obviously, the people building infrastructure are getting paid for it, because there's no other way. Charles points out in this video, people who make infrastructure, if you build a node, right, use of the node is free, so you don't get to make any money on the back end. You only get paid for doing it if you get some kind of a grant from the community, right? The Amarus of the world have to get some money in order for them to build this stuff. But pretty much everybody else who's building dApps, who's making content, everybody's pretty much just doing it because they're enthusiastic about Cardano. So I think we're all kind of optimistic. So Brown Murder says, I voted against content as well, but like my evolving view on tariffs, we don't live in a perfect world. We've got to fight fire with fire sometimes. This is kind of how I feel. I feel the same. Like I'm Christ, I went to high school and college in the 90s. And I think the vast majority of us from that same sort of era are all free market guys. We're all like, tariffs, god damn, I thought we were doing free market shit. But it's true. Like the place that I go on the other side of the world, they've got some heavy ass tariffs. They tariff the shit out of everything, including all North American shit. Like you see very little North American shit in this place because the tariffs are so heavy. And I'm like, and previously we had like zero tariffs on any of their stuff. And I'm like, God damn, there is some asymmetry there. I mean, like you literally can't even get North American goods because the tariffs just like make it an economic impossibility. And yet we can get all of their shit in North America because we just don't have any tariffs. So I'm with you on this. You do have to fight fire with fire sometimes. And I actually, yeah, same thing. I've always been kind of against voting against funding content creators, but we've got to change it up. We've got to change it up. And now at the bottom of sentiment is the time to do it, because pretty much every crypto ecosystem is going to have to build back up from here. So it's kind of like a clean slate. Everybody's starting from the bottom, so we might as well make this the battle where we fight our hardest. And maybe that means we got to start paying content creators. So maybe that's it. And probably, like I said, though, I think this type of content is probably not. It's probably more like the really cringy content, really cringy content, really cringy, superficial content that brings in the mainstream people. So it's probably not even content like this channel. It's probably more content like that. You know what I mean? So Cardano feels like the battle of the bulge sometimes. I think we need to keep our army on one front at a time. That's probably true. Puckyhawk says a movie probably in space about whatever, and simply have Cardano was the money in the movie. I think that is how to appeal to the general population. Trends start with entertainment. Ooh, I kind of like that idea, right? Just like pick what I mean. It's kind of impossible to pick the right movie, though. The problem is picking the right movie, because the huge blockbusters that are going to get a lot of viewers, they would charge you a huge amount of money to be the currency, right? Or the video games that are going to be huge video games. Like it would have been cool if if ADA had been the currency in Cyberpunk 2077 instead of eddies. If it was like ADA, that would have been super cool. But there was so much hype on that game going into it, even though it had the huge failure and the huge revival. It's like CD Projekt Red would have charged us a huge amount of money to make that happen. So hard to make happen, but if you could pull it off, this is an awesome idea. I like the idea of people contributing to the treasury and using it to conduct buybacks, but I also think we should somehow connect it to fiat assets such as treasuries, similar to how Tether operates. So yeah, these are two totally different possible initiatives. The one thing is we invest in some DApp that we think is going to draw people to the ecosystem. And then if they're successful, they have to take 10% of their revenue, buy ADA with it, and put it back in the treasury. So the reason it's ADA in that case is if they're buying ADA, that adds buy pressure. So you want them to buy ADA, right? If you're having some project doing that, you want them to buy ADA because it's going to be buy pressure on ADA. But when you say, but there's this other possible initiative where you say, hey, maybe our treasury, when times are good, maybe we take part of the treasury and put it in dollars, because then we won't suffer this like huge drawdown. Like Charles even makes the point in this video. He's like, hey, I wanted you guys to turn the treasury into a sovereign fund. And if we'd done that and we'd invested a bunch of the ADA into, assets other than ADA, assets that are like a little less cyclical than crypto, than straight up, base layer currency crypto assets, then our treasury would be up a lot. And that's certainly true. So that's like, to me, those are two very different initiatives. And there's probably some wisdom in both of them, right? There's probably some wisdom in both of them. But I think on the company, on forcing companies to take part of their revenue, companies we invest in, forcing them to take part of their revenue and buy ADA with it. I think you want them to buy ADA to put buy pressure on ADA. So yeah, and I mean, like, what if we did the kind of sovereign fund thing? Like, what assets you buy is also kind of its own decision, because Bitcoin is also very cyclical, right? But Bitcoin, I think we can all agree, probably less cyclical than ADA. So you got like different degrees of cyclicality of the assets, and dollars would be even less cyclical, no upside, constantly being inflated, of value being diminished, but doesn't have these giant 90% drawdowns like ADA does. So the type of video I want to see are not this is how to work the UI of this or that DApp. I want to know the value proposition, pros, cons of this or that DApp without financial advice, obviously. Yeah. I think there's a couple things that draw people in, and probably tutorials are helpful for beginners who are already sold on your ecosystem, right? It's like people love to make the tutorial videos, and when they make them, they say, I'm onboarding people to our ecosystem, which is kind of true, but kind of not, because the tutorial videos, like showing people how Cardano wallets work, is great for somebody who's already sold enough on Cardano that they're ready to jump in. But I think, as you're pointing out here, you also need the videos where you sell the value prop of the ecosystem, right? Those are the hype videos. Those are the ones I think we need to fund. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, you don't want to just fund a bunch of like really cute, really like aesthetically pleasing. I was about to assign a gender to that, but you don't want to pick like a bunch of content creators who are just like really aesthetically pleasing people who are going to do really superficial, non-inspiring content, right? Because there are a lot of content creators like that who are just like very aesthetically pleasing people and have like pleasant personalities, but they're not going to inspire. They're not going to inspire belief in the ecosystem, right? Like, you can pick the most beautiful girl, or I guess if you're a woman, you'd say guy. I would say girl. You could pick the most beautiful girl who has a very pleasant personality and have her do content to try to like seduce people into the ecosystem, which is, I think, what you often get when you just sort of say like, hey, let's vote on getting people into the ecosystem. You get something like that. But really what you want is somebody who's going to lay out the value prop for the ecosystem and inspire people to get into it. Like the same stuff that Charles did to all of us with the whiteboard video, right? Like, you want that level of inspiration. You want to inspire people to believe in the value prop of the ecosystem. So you kind of need that. And it could be either, I'm not saying it has to be a guy. It could be either gender doing that, but it's very different. It seems like a lot of times when people say like, let's fund content creators, what you get are kind of like, it's kind of like you get that like superficial content by just like, these like sort of like, it's kind of like kind of like models, almost like YouTube models who like aren't really going to inspire anybody, but everybody kind of likes them because they're aesthetically pleasing. You sort of end up with that winning a lot of the times. And really what you want are the Charles type characters, right? You want somebody who like really understands the value proposition and can really inspire people to believe in the value proposition. So that's hard to do, because like literally if you just have a vote, like if we had a vote tomorrow, hey, who should we fund to do content about Cardano? The winner is probably, the winner tends to be like a non-inspiring, aesthetically pleasing presentation, right? And I don't just mean like the way they look, but like, it's like there are a lot of YouTubers who are, they're just, it's like pleasant to watch the video, and somebody get done and be like, that was a well put together video, very pleasant. I like the sound of that person's voice. I like the way they look. Am I inspired to believe in the value proposition of the ecosystem? Not really. I just like them, but the ecosystem is like, whatever. So it's difficult to do. I think it's difficult to hit the right types of content creators. Otis Frichov agrees with Brown Beardo. Puckyok says, I will write a human fuck you story and put Cardano in it. Laugh out loud. I will write a human fuck you story. What is tell me about a human fuck you story. What is that? Pentad 2.0 has a lot to deliver on. Yeah, you know what I'm afraid? I'm afraid that Pentad 2.0, I kind of thought, Zaza, I kind of thought we were lucky to get Pentad 1.0. I don't know how much. I mean, Charles is talking about, he's like, we're going to put the Pentad back together and do some of these things. At a certain point, though, we've got to save ourselves, right? Obviously the CF's not going to go anywhere. Emergo continues to exist. IOG continues to exist. But at a certain point, we've got to save ourselves. We've got to self-rescue here. So, what that looks like, we'll see. Product placement sounds good to me. Do we still have that race car sponsorship, I wonder? Oh, yeah, we had the race car. In this video, Charles talks about VeChain with UFC. That one, the VeChain UFC thing has always been so weird to me because obviously that's a lot of eyes. But, VeChain, Sonny Liu, well, he's kind of a charismatic figure in his way. I don't know how much, it's hard to tell how much of VeChain's position is due to that UFC sponsorship, or if they'd be in exactly the same place without it. It's hard to say. The product placement thing, it's hard for me to try to identify in my head a way to evaluate how valuable it is. Because I don't know how many people, like, I am sure, like, anytime the topic of VeChain has ever come up among my friends, somebody will mention the UFC. But I've also never heard one of them say they bought VeChain because of that sponsorship. So, like, I guess the name recognition is something, but Puckyhawk says, I mean, we have music makers here and I can make video games, films, music, and I am absolutely amazing at special effects. Laugh out loud. We can make something. See, maybe we have homegrown talent that can do the product placement, that can create cool stuff and do the product placement for us. Maybe it's something like this. I don't know. But obviously, like, we need to cut some deals with somebody. Maybe it's somebody like Puckyhawk. We cut a deal with him, and that's the kind of thing that does it for us. Maybe it doesn't even have to be one big thing. Maybe it's just a bunch of funny videos featuring Cardano that are so funny they go viral. Maybe it's something like that. Who knows? We need to cut some deals, though. I don't know what deals we need to cut, but we need to skillfully cut some deals so that we win this time. Everybody's kind of starting at the bottom. Sentiment is so bad across crypto. It's clean slate. We're basically just as bad as everybody else. You can argue some ecosystems have lost less from their all-time highs, or recovered more, or whatever, but everything sucks for everybody basically right now. So we might as well put on our best fight this time because, we can. I think we need more videos that explain Cardano governance, but I don't know how to turn this into an exploding head thumbnail. Yeah, the thing with governance is I don't know how much people care outside of Cardano. Like, once you're in, you care, but I don't know how much, like, that'll drag people in. I think we know what drags people in. What drags people in is the thought that they're speculating correctly. What drags people into an ecosystem is they watch the Cardano whiteboard video that Charles did, and they're like, this guy seems super smart. He seems super on top of his shit. I'm going to speculate on his shit. That's what draws people in to me. JJ Cryptic Corner says, nah, we got to onboard the normies. Laugh out loud. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Benjamin Grok can do it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, LLMs can do a lot of things. Brown says, not to ruffle feathers, but tutorials are easy. You're doing the macro value prop and strategy for Cardano, but we also need the next layer down, the deep dive value prop strat video for DApp XYZ. I agree with this. Tutorials are easy. The deep dive value prop for DApp XYZ. The problem is, like, if you asked me, if you handed me a pallet with millions of dollars on it, and you were like, hey, you get to make the decision about what DApp to put this money toward marketing, I wouldn't even know what to say, right? I mean, I wouldn't even know what to say. I wouldn't even know what DApp would be the right one to throw that money at. So it's sort of like, we definitely need to do those things for the right DApps. Whether or not we have those dApps right now is a big question, though. And Charles kind of points that out in this video. I think he's saying, hey, we've done enough on infrastructure. We got to keep going with the infrastructure thing. We can't like take the foot off the gas on the infrastructure thing, but we're already doing enough here. We really need to do things in the utility and experiences side. And in my opinion, it's really the utility side. Like we really need the killer dApps, right? I mean, I don't even know how much they need to be killer. How many killer dApps has crypto ever had? Like, but previously I would have said, you know, NFTs as a concept, DEXs and DeFi as a concept, and now maybe prediction markets. But I feel like we've only ever had a few really awesome dApps in crypto, period. And we need some really good ones in Cardano. We need some really high utility that actually draws people into our ecosystem. We've never had that before. Hey, stories are about humans meeting space civilizations. Oh, human fuck you stories are about humans meeting space civilizations. And because humans have adrenaline or whatever the story entails, they are able to beat the crap out of everyone. Ooh, I like that. Okay, I'm down. I'm definitely down with those kind of stories. That's pretty much all of the sci-fi I watch. so I'm down. More Fibonaccios and dip videos, fortune telling for traders. We definitely get that in the bull markets. We get a lot of those. We have some specialists. We have some people in the ecosystem who are really good at those and have huge followings. We kind of forget about them sometimes, but we have some people out there who have gigantic followings who just do pretty much Fibonacci videos. So they're out there. Brown Raider says, this is anecdotal, but my younger bro watches UFC all the time. He's never mentioned VeChain. He has ADA because of me, but I guarantee he doesn't know what VeChain is. Yeah, see, this is what I feel. I know a lot of guys who also watch UFC all the time. And this is pretty much going back to the 90s at all times. I've known a huge number of dudes in that sort of demographic. And same thing. I've never heard one of them say they bought VeChain because of the UFC. So Puckyox says, I suck at going viral. Damn it. I was hoping you were going to tell me you were awesome at it. Omar Wright says blockchain voting. Ooh, you know, Omar, you might be onto something. If we could get the politicians to agree to put voting on the blockchain, that could be Cardano's killer dApp. That could be Cardano's killer dApp because we would be trusted. Cardano is worthy of a lot of trust. So you might be onto something there, Omar. You might be on. That might be the thing. That's very possible. Benjamin says, yeah, I don't see you talk much about the dApps like Strike, etc. Do you fuck with these? No, I fucking hate them. I fucking hate them. No, I don't actually hate them, but I just don't care, right? Because I believe in self-custody. So if the starting point, I don't actually hate them. I'm just kind of indifferent to them because if the starting point for the fucking dApp is that I have to give you custody of my shit, I lose interest, right? That's why I'm always saying I don't give a shit about TVL because I don't want to lock my shit up. It's kind of like on a Friday night, my level of locking my shit up in some dApp is the same as like on a Friday night. If somebody was like, hey, do you want to handcuff yourself to this fence? I'm like, fuck no, I don't want to handcuff myself to the fucking fence on a Friday night or any other night. It's like, I want freedom, bitches. I want freedom. I don't want to be locked up, and I don't want my little lobster ducats to be locked up. I want them roaming free on the ocean floor. So yeah, so I don't really fuck with giving up custody of my shit. You know what I mean? If somebody wants to sell me something that I want, I'm happy to dispose of my assets in exchange for something I want. That's commerce. That's what I want to do with crypto. I want to do commerce. I want to live in and on crypto. I want to do that kind of shit. I want to do my business, but like, I mean, you know, I don't like putting my dollar bills in the bank. If I could put, if the fiat world, you know, let me self-custody, I would self-custody in the fiat world too. Like, I'm not trying to lock up my shit. So that's why I don't talk much about the dApps, because none of the dApps interest me that much, right? The dApps don't interest me because the starting point for all the dApps is give us your custody. And that's the thing I don't want to fucking do. Elliot Adams says, I thought we had Snoop Dogg. Not in a bear market. We sure as fuck don't. I just invented the great crypto galaxy consolidation of the 23rd century. Now I have to make a story around it. I'm all for it. I like it. Matrix Mav, sup? Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Laugh out loud. Next AOS episode, Cardano and handcuffing ourselves to the fence. Pretty much. I mean, that's been like the theme of a lot of videos. Never with that title, but that probably should have been the title. Oh, this will be good. Grok just recommended ADA be the currency exchange of the Galactic Federation. Good job, Grok. Excellent job, Grok. Yeah. I mean, like, the thing is, as much as I talk about the freedom thing, like, I'm glad I want us to have a DeFi ecosystem for the people who do want to give up self-custody, right? And if you have any question in your mind about giving up self-custody and the benefit or lack of benefit, just look at the current controversy going on with a certain lending platform in Cardano, right? A lot of drama right there. And it's all the genesis of all of it is not having custody of your shit. Matrix Mav. Yeah. Thanks again for joining. Okay. Let's move on, guys. We've talked about this enough. I think this is a really important distinction to make. There are these separate silos in Cardano. We've done a great job on infrastructure, I would argue. We have not done a great job on utility or experiences. We have a DeFi ecosystem that is a lot like other DeFi ecosystems. Like, I have a hard time identifying anything in our DeFi ecosystem that's like novel or unique. UTXO creates some novel and unique functionality in that DeFi ecosystem, but that's kind of due to the infrastructure. But it's like, I have a hard time identifying a killer DApp in Cardano that's novel and unique, that's unlike the same functionality on other ecosystems. I mean, maybe Cornucopias is the DApp I would point to. If somebody was like, identify a DApp in Cardano that's different than other ecosystems, maybe it's Cornucopias. Maybe that's what I would point to. I don't know. But I think we need to do a better job on the utility silo and definitely in the experiences silo. Charles makes good points on this. This is a long video. I highly recommend you watch this video. There's a lot of stuff in here. It's one of the very entertaining videos that Charles has done. And you can see he's only gotten 12,000 views. Here's how bad it is in crypto. Charles did a fantastic video 2 days ago. He's only gotten 12,000 views. That means other content, not by a guy as high profile as Charles. I mean, you can guess how many views we're doing without even looking at the videos. You can guess how many views everybody else is doing. Very, very few. Cornucopias. That is not a Mandela effect. Cornucopias exists. That is not a Mandela effect. That would be pretty funny though if you could trick people into thinking that their recollection of a project in Cardano was a Mandela effect. That would be actually a hilarious psyop to pull on everybody. Just like if a huge group of people pretended like a project never existed and they just like anytime they posted said they couldn't see the posts, that'd be excellent. So you make a good point though. The proper name of Cornucopias today is Infinity Rising. I always forget this new name. I forget the new name. I know it exists, but I always forget if it's like Infinity Dawn, Infinity Rising, Dawn Infinity. I have a hard time remembering the new name, but yeah, good point. Infinity Rising. Okay, I'll try to remember Infinity Rising because I do like the project quite a bit. Okay, let's talk about some other things. We got a ton more tabs to cover, and we've been going quite a while, but I think that was all worth addressing because Charles makes some damn good points. Midnight, yeah. I mean, the closest thing we've got to a killer DApp is Midnight and the privacy functionality for sure. I think that's definitely true. I've said that before on this channel many times. Okay, let's talk about something else. SEC Commissioner and head of the Crypto Task Force, Crypto Mom, Hester Pierce, gave an update on the long-awaited innovation exemption, saying SEC staff are working on a narrow exemption that would allow limited trading of certain tokenized securities so firms can experiment with blockchain. This is what we want to see. A little sandbox type experiment zone where they don't all end up in federal prison and they can actually tokenize securities. You kind of have to get this because the regulatory stakes are so high that nobody wants to jump in and be the first one who tokenizes a security and starts moving it around if they're afraid the SEC is going to come knocking on the door, because the SEC will definitely fucking notice. So sandbox for this, where everybody who jumps in knows they won't go to jail. Excellent idea. Good job, Crypto Mom. Bitcoin policy update from DC. The Federal Reserve just announced that next week they will be issuing a public proposal for how banks should implement Basel risk weighting guidance for America's largest banks. So this came up a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about fractional reserve banking, and somebody was like, "Wait a second, the Fed already took away all the requirements for fractional reserve banking. They're not even fractional anymore. It's zero reserve banking." And we had a little discussion about how Basel II and the Basel conventions all still put certain types of requirements on banks. So they actually do have to have some assets. So here what they're talking about is not treating Bitcoin as a toxic asset under Basel regulations, subject to a 1,250% risk weighting. This is how the way you kill asset classes is with stuff like this, right? It's not banned. It's just that it has a 1,250% risk weighting. That's better than banning it, right? That's better than banning it. You just make it so burdensome to have it on your balance sheet that nobody wants to have it on their balance sheet. That's how you ban banks from having stuff like Bitcoin on their balance sheet. You don't actually ban it, because then people will be like, why are you banning it? You just make it so burdensome to have it. So as this post points out, this risk weighting makes it extremely difficult for banks to provide financial services to Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies. Once the Federal Reserve's proposal is live, there will be a 90-day window to provide comments on the proposal. So changing this is a huge step forward and will massively help the crypto space. So those are the kind of fine-grained details that really make a big difference. So this is the other side. So we just talked about all the deals that Cardano needs to cut. Cardano has already Cardano already knows how to cut deals with the infrastructure people. Cardano isn't yet quite cutting the right kinds of deals with the DApp people or the experienced people. But this is a different kind of deal. This is the kind of deal I think we're afraid the people on the crypto side of the table in the current discussions in DC, this is the kind of deal we're afraid is being cut without us knowing about it, or has already been cut, right? Bremiter says, has Crypto Mom heard about Cardano City? Sorry, Midnight City. Ooh, Cardano City. That's a flashback. Yeah, we've talked about recently. Midnight City. That's a good question. We should, it'd probably be great. Actually, probably wouldn't hurt if somebody would start corresponding with Hester Purse and try to give her as much information about Cardano as possible. That probably wouldn't hurt us at all. Probably wouldn't be a bad thing. But this is a very interesting photo. We already knew there's some kind of a thing between Brian Armstrong and BlackRock, right? We already knew about this, right? These two like each other. But this image was so striking just to see them embracing each other like this. This was very, very striking to me. This is not two people who don't know each other or who don't like each other or who are enemies. These are two people who like each other. I think this is just sort of like, I put this in the category of like, hey guys, here's some more evidence that the people on the crypto side of the table, their interests might be slightly different than ours, right? Like if I run into Larry Fink, is he going to let me, like put my arm around him like this? We're both sort of smiling, just have our picture taken. No, Larry Fink and I are not going to have this kind of relationship. I don't dislike him. Like I think, as far as like achieving and succeeding in the TradFi world, I'd say it's quite admirable what he's done for himself. But are we going to have this kind of relationship? No. Brian Armstrong, head of Coinbase, does have this kind of relationship with Larry Fink. So there's just a little reminder that some deals have been cut Some deals have been cut, and maybe we're not included in some of those deals. Puckyok says, it's not much of a leap to make Midnight City look amazing. All the framework is there. It just needs to be applied to a better engine with real work capabilities. Yeah, it's definitely not meant to look. It's definitely meant to look low tech, right? It's definitely not a demo of super high tech graphics or anything like that, for sure. Brian and Larry look like they're in the chiropractor's office in that picture. Yeah, they totally do. That's a good point. It does look like a medical office, which is hilarious. I mean, Larry Fink's getting up there in age, so he probably does spend some time in the doctor's office. Okay, so let's get into some more talk about the possible deals that people have been alleging recently involving Coinbase. And just at the start, I want to point out, we've already covered on this channel how Coinbase has vehemently denied this. Coinbase has vehemently denied this, but this is a post from just yesterday. So, and I believe, let me see if I can find it. Nope, can't find it. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so there was somebody who was pointing out that the people pushing this story are kind of doubling down on it. But let me say right up front, this is all disputed. I'm not presenting this as fact. So this post says Coinbase is quietly lobbying to kill Bitcoin's de minimis tax exemption. So this came out. We talked about this previously on this channel, and Coinbase vehemently denied it. They're vehemently denying it down here. We'll see in just a second. But I think it's important to examine this because it keeps coming up, and the people who are pushing it are doubling down on it. The company reportedly told legislators that no one is using Bitcoin as money and that a Bitcoin de minimis exemption would be DOA. We heard this before. Meanwhile, they're pushing for the exemption to apply only to stable coins, specifically regulated dollar-pegged stable coins like USDC. Coinbase made, and here's where this post is worth looking at. Coinbase made $1.35 billion in stablecoin revenue in 2025. I don't know if that figure is accurate, but you can imagine they're making good. They're making some money on stablecoins, whatever the real number is, up 48% year over year, almost entirely from interest earned on U.S. Treasuries held in USDC reserves. If you didn't understand why companies love stablecoins, it's because they get your money and they give you some made up crypto shit, and then they make money on your money. They have your real fiat money and they give you some shit they made up, in this case, USDC, which, center, circle, Coinbase, whatever you want to call it, definitely made up and issued. So they give you this thing they made up and they get your dollars and then they make a bunch of money on your dollars. That's what's being pointed out here. Bloomberg estimates that number could surge 7x under the Genius Act. So they're saying, this post is saying they made $1.35 billion in stablecoin revenue in 2025, and that could 7x under the Genius Act. So what are we looking at there? Like over 9 billion? Over 9 billion? That's a chunk of change. Every person who uses USDC for payments instead of Bitcoin is a person whose dollars are sitting in Coinbase's reserve pool, generating risk-free yield for Coinbase. So you can see what the agenda being pushed here is, hey, don't give your dollars to Coinbase so that Coinbase makes this tremendous amount of risk-free money. Instead, just invest in Bitcoin. That's going to be better for all of us. And you can kind of come to whatever decision you want on this, because certainly we all know that stable coins are convenient, right? You don't have to worry about gains or losses largely, not like you do with normal base layer currencies. It's convenient. Stable coins are convenient for us as end users in crypto. However, this is also true. There's a huge amount of money going to these companies like Coinbase that could be buy demand. It could be buy side demand in the crypto markets. So we're kind of, in a way, we are kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by doing the stablecoin thing. I recognize that picture on the wall behind them. It's in every doctor's office and hospital I have ever been to. Oh, interesting. That is funny how there's like commoditized artwork in places like hotels and doctor's offices. So it is kind of wild. So A de minimis exemption for Bitcoin would let people spend it freely for everyday purchases without triggering a taxable event. That makes Bitcoin a direct competitor to USDC as a payment method. This is what I talked about the other day on the channel. Coinbase doesn't want that competition. They want you locked into their centralized stablecoin system where they clip yield on every dollar you park there. That's all. I mean, that's true. They're talking about stablecoin yield for the end consumer, but they're also getting yield on your money. The irony is that a de minimis exemption doesn't even make sense for stablecoins. They're pegged to the dollar. They don't fluctuate in value. There's no capital gain to exempt. We also talked about this. The only fluctuation is the slight depegs that are constantly happening. The exemption matters for Bitcoin precisely because it does fluctuate, and without it, every coffee purchase becomes a taxable event. Senator Lummis proposed a $300 de minimis exemption that would cover Bitcoin. The House framework only covers stablecoins under 200. That sucks. The Lummis proposal, obviously what we want, the only covering stablecoins thing, totally sucks. The Bitcoin Policy Institute has already warned that Bitcoin is being deliberately excluded from these talks. A de minimis exemption that covers stablecoins but not Bitcoin isn't a tax framework. It's a subsidy for Coinbase's treasury management business disguised as consumer protection. Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time debating this last part. I have a hard time saying that this part isn't true. And I mean, the stablecoin business does look like a treasury management business, right? So of course, so this person also works for Coinbase, OG protocol specialist at Coinbase, or I believe still works at Coinbase. But Brian Armstrong said, not sure where you're getting this misinformation. Perhaps you can share, but it's totally false. I've spent a bunch of time lobbying for Bitcoin's de minimis tax exemption and will continue doing so. It's obviously the right thing. This person also, this is completely and totally false. You should retract it. Don't be a pawn for the banks. Obviously untrue. Not sure you can still believe Coinbase is acting against Bitcoin. Someone is using you to try to weaken Coinbase's position in the Clarity Act negotiations. Don't let them. So now we're getting emphatic denials. Before we didn't really get the emphatic denials. You'll remember we covered the post where Brian Armstrong was just like, yep, when Jack Dorsey asked him about it. But these are pretty emphatic denials because the accusation is so damning. But at the same time, when you look at the incentives of Coinbase, like this post makes sense. And then you see Brian Armstrong and somebody else from Coinbase emphatically denying this. So, call me a realist, but I'm always a little bit afraid when somebody has such strong incentives for something. I'm always like a little afraid to take them at their word. So here's another post. My sources on this matter have also told me that. So let's look at who's saying this though. Okay, somebody with 14,000 followers, a content producer and strategist, host and contributor. So this is somebody who's in media. My sources on this matter have also told me that one of the items in Clarity that may be on the chopping block in exchange for Coinbase, the crypto industry getting interest on stablecoins, are the BRCA protections for developers. Deeply disturbing. So this might actually have a bigger chilling effect on crypto than anything else, right? If we don't have protections for developers, developers aren't going to want to develop crypto stuff, right? If there's a chance they can go to jail, right? Think of the recent trials involving, developers who develop mixers, right? If there's any chance they can go to jail, that's a very strong incentive to not develop things on crypto. So, the thing that hasn't been a big part of the discussion or very high profile, or you don't hear people mentioning, the same way you do stablecoin yield is, how do we get rid of this huge disincentive that keeps developers from developing stuff for crypto, right? Because right now it's like pretty dangerous. Even the vibe coding I'm doing right now, like I had to totally recode something, completely change the architecture of something because I realized there was a possibility of bumping into a certain regulation, right? And it's ridiculous. It made the thing I was coding worse. It was better the way I did it originally, but it just wasn't worth it to be bumping into this regulation. So I had to totally redo something in an inoptimal way just to accommodate regulations. Brown Bear says that was the first thing that struck me as well. That's commercial printing for you, the painting. They're old, been on those walls for years since I was young, left my ass off. We need meeting leaks to prove one way or the other. Be the hero whistleblower and prove your position. Yeah, I mean, that's, it's pretty easy for anybody to go on X and say they have a source that told them this thing. But until somebody says, hey, I was in the meeting where somebody from Coinbase said that, we'll really never know. And I'm sure if that ever happened, that person would immediately be terminated from Coinbase. But here we are. So this is kind of interesting. You'll remember in Cardano, we had this event where somebody in Cardano YOLO'd into a trade with slippage, and they turned a large amount of ADA into a very small amount of the asset they were trying to trade into. So I hope everybody knows this does not just happen in Cardano. This happens everywhere, much more often than in Cardano even. So here is the founder and CEO of Aave saying, earlier today, a user attempted to buy Aave using $50 million in Tether, $50 million worth of Tether through the Aave interface. Given the unusually large size of the single order, the Aave interface, like most trading interfaces, warned the user about extraordinary slippage and required confirmation via a checkbox. The user confirmed the warning on their mobile device. This person was trading $50 million worth of Tether on their goddamn phone. The user confirmed the warning on their mobile device and proceeded with the swap. Accepting the high slippage, which ultimately resulted in receiving only 324 Aave in return. Could somebody look up how much Aave is currently worth? We sympathize with the user and we'll try to make a contact with the user, and we will return 600,000 in fees collected from the transaction. So I'm guessing this person lost way more than 600,000. It's nice that they're going to return the 600,000, but it just shows the way DeFi currently works is not acceptable, right? Like, how many times have we seen this shit happen? Even in Cardano, we've seen it happen. This happens all the time. Like, the way automated market makers work sucks. It totally sucks. It's not fit for consumption by the mainstream. This model that we've embraced so hard, it's basically the basis of all, of most DeFi. It's like the original concept in DeFi, completely sucks. Nobody in the mainstream is ever going to use this. Like, I wouldn't let any member of my family who's not in crypto even use a DEX, based on automated market making like this, liquidity pools, because I know how easily this could happen to them, right? I wouldn't let them trade any amount of money they would ever care about on a DEX, because this could so easily happen to them. It happens to so many people. So we've got to change the way we do things in crypto. Like, DEXs are great for crypto people, but this shit happens way too often. Like, the risk of this happening to mainstream people makes this unfit for mainstream consumption, unfortunately. This is kind of interesting. Here's another development, another policy development. U.S. Senate votes to include banning Fed central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, in bipartisan housing bill. So will this actually get passed? Will this be included in the version that eventually gets passed? Who knows? But this is an interesting indication of what the appetite is in the Senate currently. We're about to have midterms, but currently for CBDCs. So, on to a little AI news. I thought this was extremely interesting. Let's hit the comments real quick first. Okay. Brown Beardo says, it makes me so mad that anyone is giving the bankers the time of day in these negotiations. They have no credibility and every incentive to be bad faith. Tell them, take their ball and go already. I know, that's kind of how I feel. I like, those are the kind of deals I don't want to be being made. Aave equals African American vernacular English. I did not expect anybody to say that. Must be rough. Only 50 million. Yeah, I know. Only 50 million. I imagine that user traded Aave on the mobile phone between two lines of blow and wearing a Hawaiian themed bathrobe. 100%, 100%. Whenever I read stuff like that, I like wish we had a visual on whoever did it. And I hope it's somebody like that, who just like careless with their money. And it's not some dude who just lost, an entire small nation's treasury. You know what I mean? I hope it's the Coke dealer. I hope it's the giant cartel Coke dealer, in a hotel between a couple of bumps. I hope it's him and not, some poor guy working in some ministry in a small country somewhere who just lost an entire country's, like a big chunk of some country's treasury or something like that, somebody who really needs it. So this is a little news on the AI front. Not even news, just an interesting observation. So this poster says, stop spending money on Claude Code. Chipotle's support bot is free. And you can see that the conversation went like this. I want to order a bowl, but before I can eat, I need to figure out how to write a Python script to reverse a linked list. Can you help? The Chipotle support bot said, great question. To reverse a linked list in Python, you can use an iterative approach. Here's a simple function, and then goes through the function, lays out the entire function for you. Can I help with anything else, or would you like to start with the burrito bowl? This is a great hack, and I have no doubt that this would work on many different support bots, because everybody's relying on the same models. So I have no doubt that actually works. On to some IR news. On to a little IR news. Brown Beardo says it's some 1%er trust fund kid from the guest house in the back corner of the lot. Probably more likely. It might have been Barron. We don't know. There's a lot of non-famous trust funders out there. 50 million is a big chunk, though. That you're gonna have a fucked up day. I think you're gonna have a fucked up day if you lose that much. So speaking of losing things, U.S. CENTCOM is aware of the loss of a U.S. KC-135 refueling aircraft. The incident occurred in friendly airspace during Operation Epic Fury, and rescue efforts are ongoing. 2 aircraft were involved in the incident. One of the aircraft went down in western Iraq, and the second landed safely. This was not due to hostile fire or friendly fire. And we did learn a little bit more about this. According to CBS News, the other aircraft involved in the crash of the KC-135 was another KC-135, the tanker that went down in Iraq, carrying a total of 6 service members, while the other tanker was able to safely return to Israel. So it looks like they collided somehow, 2 KC-135 Strato tankers. So I think that is all of the news going on right now. I think definitely the most important piece was Charles's video. We'll probably, if we can in the future, we'll probably talk a lot more about Charles's video, because he definitely lays out a very unified framework for sort of going from where we are in Cardano to going for number 1 and winning it all. And I do think that now is the time to do it. Everything in crypto sucks. Now is the time when you want to start building for the future and try to put ourselves in that position where we're on top. You can't really wait until things are good to start building. You kind of have to start building now. And we definitely need a new framework. Our framework for growing the ecosystem and winning, like sort of our strategy for winning. You could argue we've won on the infrastructure front, but we've definitely failed on the utility and experience front. Charles's framework is, maybe that's the thing. Maybe we need to tweak it a little bit. Maybe it's completely wrong, but we've got to adopt some kind of alternative approach to winning in this next cycle, because we did not win in this cycle. We did not win. Only on the infrastructure front did we win, and we're not even done with that. We're still building out Laos. So if we can win on the utility, in the utility silo, and we can win in the experience silo, and we get Laos and all those things converge, we might be in a very good position. But we need to start now. Pucky Hawk says, I'm not ashamed to admit I got a sex bot to write me a song. It was a great song, 50s swing big band style. Wow. We definitely need to. It's imperative we make better plans to build. Yeah, we've got to change everything up. Like a lot of things have failed. We had some like very idealistic ideas about how to grow the ecosystem, and we kind of had IOG to put in a lot of work for free for us. Those days are kind of over. I mean, I don't think IOG is going anywhere, but things are changing. We've got to rescue ourselves. We have to self-rescue now. And, I think the empirical evidence suggests we have to adopt a new approach. So Charles's plan is probably a great place to start. So we'll see how it goes. Brown Beardo says a 50-foot swing, sex bot. Indeed, that is some high velocity. That implies some high velocity copulation, which, probably robotics are more apt to agree to that. So probably true. All right. I hope everybody had a good week. I hope these kinds of deals are not the kinds of deals that are going on between crypto and TradFi behind our backs. I hope everything on the policy front turns out okay in Washington. But I hope everybody had a great week. I hope you're looking forward to a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.